Gender equality in South Africa is a real thing and there's no beating the bush around it. And in this video, I'm going to give you some tips on how you can close that gender gap. But realistically though, what life events create these gender gaps? And why does it really happen? Most people, that gap starts in high school. At times, the females are encouraged to take more of the homekeeping responsibilities around the house. Maybe there's less time to focus on schoolwork, and more traditional homes would maybe groom their females to be the caregivers, to be homemakers, and not really prospect for work outside of the home. Okay, the gap usually starts there and extends further as you go into your tertiary studies and expand to work outside the home. Usually after that graduation period, that's when things really start to, that gap really starts to increase. When starting that first job, there may be pay disparities between men and women, and we've seen that pay gap even between the genders of equal educational qualification and experience. That gap is around 25%. And that gap just starts to grow bigger as young adults move into the next stage of life, of marriage and starting a family. Because once the children come, maternity leave comes about. Women need more downtime, and we want to spend more time with our newborns. Ultimately, somebody has to stay home when those children get sick. They need primary caregivers during that downtime, and typically it's the woman that plays that role. Women also tend to spend around 9 hours of more a week on household chores and housekeeping than men. In South Africa, around 42% of households are headed by women, which means they're doing a lot more than 9 hours. It's basically a 24-hour job. Have you experienced gender inequality in your place of business, in your work? Let me know in the comments. Women tend to be the primary caregivers in the home, looking after the children, also looking after more senior, more elderly, more sickly members of the family as well. And because of those primary duties, women tend to have flexible hours around those primary tasks. So they tend to take on more part-time jobs and flexi jobs that might not pay as lucratively, and ultimately spending less time in the workforce in total. So you see these women doing these tasks as unpaid labor, as opposed to being in the workforce and getting paid for the value that they add in that environment. Female-headed households are approximately 40% poorer than male-headed households. 48% of South African female-headed households support extended members of their families as well, whereas 23% of male-headed households do the same. Additionally, women have to put up with getting paid less, earning less than men. Coping with domestic violence and gender-based violence is a huge problem in South Africa, and struggling with access to resources to better their lives. This means the power dynamic in the relationship and in the workplace is skewed towards men. If you're getting value from this video, please consider hitting that subscribe button so you'll always get an opportunity to watch one of my videos when I put it out. Compounded with a massive pay gap that men and women experience in South Africa. Definitely these two groups of individuals are taking different paths when it comes to wealth building. South Africa has a median pay gap of 23 to 35%, meaning both genders, same professions, same experience, will experience the pay gap, the difference being between 23% to 35%. And we have numerous legislations in South Africa to try and combat this. The projected timeline to close this gender gap between men and women in South Africa was projected to be around 99 years. But due to the various pandemic lockdowns, this has now been extended to 135 years. And that wealth building journey is pretty obvious when it comes to retirement savings. I mean, I sit with men and women every day, specifically talking about retirement, and their needs are different. Women have to finance more years because statistically we live longer hours than men. A married woman or a woman that are in relationships, statistically if they live longer, they're going to have the burden of looking after maybe an aging or a sick partner. They will have to be bearing those costs if provision has not been made, and at times they could even be left with the bill as well. Ultimately, this means less savings and a longer period of life. Another gap that we face is the gender investment gap. And as somebody who sits with women every single day, women are very reluctant to take on risk. Women want to play it safe. And I understand that. I mean, you work a lot more hours for a lot less money, and you don't want to risk the little that you do have. Men are also more risk aware than women. I find women asking me which accounts provide the highest interest, whereas men are asking me, where can I get a higher return? And those are two very, very different concepts of return and interest. And when women tend to invest more conservatively, they don't have that benefit of those higher returns that an aggressive investment can provide. So they miss out on the potential growth of their savings. Ultimately, closing this gap will take around 200 years or so at the current pace. And unfortunately, in South Africa, financial wellness between men and women differ significantly because of that pay gap. This affects your ability to save, your ability to access lines of credit, the ability to retire more comfortably. Watch this if you are keen on closing that gender gap. And the South African Retirement Reality report indicated that 54% of women do not have a retirement plan, compared to 46% of men. The good news is that as an individual woman or man, you can take your own steps to try and close the gap for yourself, if not for a greater society. I would love to help you do that. Click the link down below and we can chat one-on-one on how we can close the gender gap. If you educate a man, you educate one person. But when you educate a woman, you educate an entire nation.